Hello, everyone. Hope y'all are doing well. Hopefully, you're getting some sleep, unlike me. Um, or you're studying for your test tomorrow during this really wild week we're having. Please remember your last psychology exam is at 7:30 in the morning tomorrow. Please arrive 15 minutes early at 7:15. I'm gonna plan on being early in my room. I'll have some coffee and some munchkins for y'all if you want to stop by and grab some. Um, and while this has been a tough year, y'all have really done great. And it's time to finish strong and not wrong. So today I was lucky enough to get this donut, which is upside down. It's from one of my students, Maddox, from the Ingot Bakery, if I'm saying that correctly. And it looked beautiful when I was given it. Man, looked beautiful. And then I was driving home, it was in my bag, and the car in front of me slammed on its brakes, so I slammed on my brakes just in time. And the reason it did that was because their car in front of it slammed on its brakes, car in front of it slammed on its brakes, etc., because there was an accident on a very busy part of 19. So I was lucky just not to be caught up in a pileup. So in the end, it's a weirdly positive thing for me, at least. Um, and that's you know, I guess a good thing, but it's just strange because it's a car crash. But that's a lot like this donut here. So the donut got smashed, and yet it tastes great. It's amazing. Yeah, do I like it? And that's what this year is. This is a metaphor for this year. Y'all come into school. Y'all came into this year. Y'all came into kindergarten years ago as these great young little things. Then you became high schoolers and bright, about to go conquer the world. And, a year can be tough. Testing can be tough. It can feel like you get smashed to pieces. But in the end, like this donut, you come out of it still functional and great. All right. And that's y'all with psychology. This was not a perfect year by far. And, you know, I think y'all will do great tomorrow. So let's go over what will be on the test. So let me share my screen. Okay. So this second part of the ACE test is all about research, study, and design. So you'll have a couple questions, and we'll look at some potential responses and questions and responses here in a second. But the every one of these is going to end with a major big question called the research design question. And that's why I put this up there. So you're not going to have to pick your own topic. They will give you a weird situation and potentially, or an easy one. It might be an easy one. I'm hoping easy, but we'll see. So you'll be given a topic and you're going to be tasked with coming up with a psychology experiment for it. And this is where you're going to have to basically find, you know, a hypothesis, what type of hypothesis it will be. Okay. So there's one-tailed hypotheses. So that's when you have a drug, it fixes problem. And then there's two-tailed hypotheses. I'm messing that up tonight. And that's when you have a drug that may fix the problem in some people and make it worse in others. And so it has like two tails to it. And then you have your third type called a null hypothesis. And what that is basically a denial of your hypothesis. So if they ask you any question tomorrow to write a null hypothesis about this situation, all you are doing is writing a denial of that situation. So if new drug Predamax creates bipolar disorder, okay, and they're going to run some experiments on it to write a null hypothesis for that is Predamax or whatever will not affect the conditions of bipolar disorder in any way possible or in any fashion. Make it a little bit fancier than that. So the drug for this bipolar disorder will have no effect on the patient's disorder or suffering. That's a null hypothesis. And every experiment's goal is to prove that null hypothesis wrong. And then you either have a one-tail hypothesis, the drug works, or a two-tail hypothesis. The drug works for some greatly and others, kind of well, but maybe they need something extra. So those are your hypotheses. Then you're going to come up with your independent and dependent variables and operationalize them, meaning put them to the test. How are you going to test them out? Are you going to do a certain type of experiment? And, for that, we'll use that drug. Who are you going to give it to? How are you going to have a control group? So how are you going to make that independent variable work? What is the population of your study? The type of sampling you'll use, that's the people you choose to be in your study. Will it be opportunity, volunteer? Will you pay the people to show up? What will be your type of study, your research design elements? Know those. Know your different types of data, qualitative and quantitative. And how will you guard against bias, demand characteristics, and ecological, and how will you make it ecologically valid? So look at this, and this will help you understand that anything you don't understand on here, look up in the book or in the notes. And then that's the same. That's why I had you answer these questions. Hopefully you did. I'd really help you with this exam. So if you need more help, study with Mahar. We'll go over every single case study with you. He's still working on some of the newer ones. So you might find that you won't find everything there. But looking at let's see if he has any new papers up. Still on paper. Paper 2. Miss Mark scheme. All right, so this is what the paper is going to look like tomorrow. You have your questions. Describe 2 ways that variables were controlled and the procedure was standardized in Andrade. Perry's not, or Perry outline was meant by placebo, including an example from the study. Y'all got that. Pillivan, describe how quantitative data was used. Suggest one strength of collecting quantitative data in this study and explain what is measured by standard deviation. That can be a tough one. Standard deviation is used to measure how accurate the data is. So does any of the data deviate from the norm? And if so, then that means it could be that your data is off. All right. So in the study by Pizzullo, the experimenters wore professional casual clothing. Name one example of this clothing worn by the experimenters. Explain why her professional casual clothing was necessary. Describe 2 ways that dependent variables can be measured using any examples. That's knowing about dependent variables. Look that up. 7 is about Xanthi and her experiment. And how she can measure different things in her experiment. And then 8 is about Robin using a questionnaire. So they're going to ask you about a questionnaire in that situation. So it goes from cases to situations, if you notice this. And then finally, then number 9 is Juan and his investigated attitudes towards mental health. He will use an interview and they ask you some questions about that. And then 10 is the big dog question, where they give you this specific situation. Dr. Felix believes that adults between the ages of 55 and 65 cope less well with their job, regardless of whether they stay in the same job or change jobs. Dr. Felix plans to use a sample of adults aged 55 at the beginning of the study. She will contact the participants by telephone as she has a record of each individual's telephone number and will be following appropriate ethical guidelines. Describe how Dr. Felix could conduct a longitudinal study to investigate how well adults between the ages of 55 and 65 cope with their jobs. Do not describe how Dr. Felix would recontact her participants, the sampling technique, or ethical guidelines in your answers. So they're telling you don't even touch those subjects. But how can Dr. Felix recontact her participants? So let's go over to the mark scheme and see what they want. For their answer. All right. So 4 required tasks for any longitude study are how it's measured as tests and tasks, how it's scored, so how these tasks are scored, the frequency or the pattern of testing over time. So how many times are you going to test over this long period of time, this study over a long period of time? What are the controls and standardization? All right. And so that's what they want you to talk about. And then any other appropriate responses could also be credited. So basically, they want you to describe how Dr. Felix could do this experiment through those 4 methods. And then this is how it's graded. A level 5 or 9 or 10 marks is the response describes all of the required features, all explicit and with detail and with most appropriate terminology, clearly applies knowledge of methodology involved in planning and investigation. Okay. I don't want to make this too long because I'll lose y'all if I haven't already. So I'm going to wrap this up, but know that y'all have a good chance at this. Walk in there with confidence. In the grand scheme of life, we're on a rock flying through space, flying around a nuclear fireball, and you're taking a test tomorrow on psychology. Okay? You have all the power in the world. Look at what you're already doing. You're flying on a rock through space. You got this. All right? Be as good as this Vietnamese donut and dominate that test tomorrow. I trust in you. I'll see you in the morning. Best of luck. You got this, Royals. I know you do. Have a great night, great morning, whenever you see this. See ya. That was an awful. What am I doing? See y'all later.